Hi, my name is Devlin Britt, and I am here with my grandfather, who I call Pa. I am interviewing my grandfather to get information on my great-great-uncle, called Jack Nalty, who fought in the Spanish Civil War. Now, Pa, will you tell us a little bit about what was the Spanish Civil War and what was it like?
Well, no war is nice, but civil wars are probably the worst because they're two groups of people from the same country fighting each other. And the Spanish Civil War, just like the Irish Civil War, was a pretty bloody kind of combat. Spain was kind of divided into very rich people who tended to be on the side of the Roman Catholic Church, and then on the other side there were the workers and the more liberal people. And the rich people and the church were unhappy with the newly elected government, which was called the Republican government, because they were inclined to take away a lot of the power of the rich, and they were also taking away a lot of the power of the Roman Catholic Church. And consequently, the nationalists, as they were called, who were composed of the rich people and the church, rose up against the government and tried to take over the country. And that was what started the Civil War, because that went on for over 3 years with one side fighting the other. And it was into that Jack Nalty came.
Who was Jack Nalty?
Well, Jack Nalty was my uncle. He was my mother's older brother. I never actually met him that I can fully remember, but I remember at one stage I was in his home in Dublin and he was carrying me on his shoulders up and down the stairs, and I can remember how good a feeling that was, but that's the only memory that I have of him.
Paul, when was Jack Nalty born?
He was born in 1902 in September, so he would have been, if he had lived, he would have been 100 years of age this year.
What was he like, Paul?
I'd say one of the things about him is that he was a very compassionate, caring kind of person. I'd say he was pretty devoted to a cause once he got involved in it. He was, I would also say, an idealist in that he believed very strongly in certain principles and would want to see them carried through.
Did he participate in any major sports?
Well, he was a well-known cross-country runner in Dublin. He was in the Dublin Harriers, which was a group of runners which were fairly well known in Dublin. And he won several races, generally around a mile in length or a mile and a half.
What wars did he fight in?
Fought in the IRA during the War of Independence, when the Irish were fighting the British in Ireland, and then he fought in the Civil War when the Ireland split up in terms of what it wanted from the treaty with England, and he was on one side, and he fought in that war. And then there was a period of his life where he didn't fight at all, but when the Spanish Civil War started in 1936, he decided that he would fight there. So he actually fought in 3 wars.
In the Spanish Civil War, what side did Jack Nalty fight on?
Well, Jack fought on the side of the Republicans, that is the side that had been elected as the government, and who were being rebelled against. And many people from all over the world formed into what were called brigades, International Brigades, and they all came to Spain to fight against the rebels. And Jack was one of those, coming from Ireland.
What happened to Jack Nalty in the first part of the war?
Well, he arrived in Spain with about 10 other people from Ireland. And they went straight to a training camp in central Spain, and they were being trained to fight in the war. Now, all these men had also got fighting experience because they had been in the IRA, so they were considered to be fairly accomplished and expert soldiers. And Jack had been a commander in the IRA army, so he would have been considered one of the better soldiers. They arrived in December, just around Christmas time in 1936, and things were at a bad stage of the war because the Republicans were being very pushed and the Nationalists were taking over. The Nationalists were headed by a man called Francisco Franco, who was a very powerful general, and they were very, very strong army. And because Jack and the other people who arrived with him from Ireland had such a lot of experience, they were immediately sent into battle. They probably weren't quite ready for that, but they went in because, well, I guess that's what soldiers do. When they're called into combat, they just go. And they were there to fight, so they went in. They arrived in the middle of a very bad battle which centered around Madrid, and it was called the Battle of Cordoba. And in that battle, which was a lot of people died, Jack was severely wounded. He had a chest wound and also a injury in his arm. And consequently, in the middle of the battle, he was seen to be injured and he had to find his own way to the field hospital. So he walked like 3 or 4 kilometers to the field hospital. He was offered an ambulance to take him there, but he said that he thought that other people needed the ambulance more than he did. So he walked the distance.
What happened to Jack Nalty after he recovered from his wounds?
He was sent back to Ireland to enlist more people to come from Ireland to Spain, to try and get more men to come as soldiers to Spain. And he went back there. He didn't want to go back, but he went back. He stayed there for several months. He gave various talks to people in Ireland about the need for the Republicans to win in Spain. And there was a friend of his who had led the group to Spain in the first place from Ireland called Frank Ryan. And Frank Ryan was a particular friend of Jack. And in one of the battles while Jack was in Ireland, Frank was made a prisoner of war. And Jack, on hearing that, decided he had to go back to Spain and fight. So he went back to Spain to fight in actually the last battle of Spain.
Who was winning the war and why?
Things were looking very bad for the Republicans at this time because Spain was practically taken over by the Nationalists. They were in a losing battle to a large degree. And the word had gone out that the International Brigades were going to be withdrawn from Spain because Hitler and Mussolini were already in Spain fighting on the side of the Nationalists. And the Republicans felt that if they could withdraw the International Brigades, then maybe pressure could be put internationally on Hitler and Mussolini to withdraw, which could give the Republicans some chance to win, because Hitler and Mussolini were so strong. It was announced that the International Brigades would be withdrawn from Spain, but the Battle of Ebro was on. Jack went in to fight in that, and the day that he was killed, the announcement had already just been made that the International Brigades were being withdrawn.
How did Jack Nalty die?
The account that I have is that Jack went back into the battle, was fighting. There was an account given by 2 men who were under his command, and they were in a trench, and one of them said to the other, there doesn't seem to be much action going on, and then they realized that everybody had left, that the rest of their comrades had withdrawn, had retreated. And they said, we better get out of here. And just as they were talking about that, Jack arrived, and he said, I've come back, you guys better get out of here because, we're retreating. And they packed up the various ammunition and stuff like that and took it with them. And then they were heading back down the hill when one of them was shot quite severely, but he survived. And then Jack was shot in the head, and that's where he died.
Was Jack Nalty's death mentioned back in Dublin?
He was mentioned in a lot of the newspapers at the time that he died. And then there was a song written by a Christy Mahan, an Irish writer, called Viva la Quinta Brigada, which is long live the 25th Brigade. And Jack Nalty is mentioned there with a number of other men. It's available on a CD.
And there you have it, the story of my great-great-uncle and what was the Spanish Civil War and how war is really no big adventure and how awful war really is.
Jack Nalty, Tommy Patton and Frank Conroy, Jim Foley, Tony Fox and Dick O'Neill. Viva la Quinta Brigada, the Passuram, the pledge that made them fight. Adelante is the cry around the hillside.